When regret teaches, take notes. The last 2 weeks, I have been meditating on the lessons that regret can provide. Like some of you, I've been engaged in a form of functional grief during this time of racial and political division, paired with a pandemic that is generating more variance than the roles played by Eddie Murphy in any of his films. Coming soon, coming to America too. Part of my reflections on regret stem from the death of legendary actor and trailblazer, Miss Cicely Tyson. I, like so many others, have long admired the majestic ways of Miss Tyson and her awareness of her power as a black woman in an industry that is known for misogyny, both in front of and behind the camera. The sadness I felt upon her passing was compounded by the fact that I missed an opportunity to work with Miss Tyson due to my own self-doubt, fear of success, and fear of failure at play. In the early months of 2020, I spoke with an old friend about wanting to broaden the impact of my children's book, The Love of 10,000. I remember telling him how powerful it would be to have the Cicely Tyson narrate the poem with her divine precision. My friend, who happens to be in the entertainment industry, not only gave me advice on how best to approach Miss Tyson's manager, he also gave me her manager's email address. I had the golden egg right there in my WhatsApp account. That was in March. 2 months later, my friend emailed me to follow up on my progress. Text message. Friend, how are you doing? Me. I'm well. You? Friend. Good. Did you ever email Cicely Tyson's manager? Me. Not yet. Working on the Audible version myself first. Receipts can be a painful reminder of self-sabotage. I choked. Fear of success and fear of failure came from me, and I relented. Who was I to approach a woman of Miss Tyson's caliber? Even worse, what if she agreed to my project? Am I prepared for that kind of success given all of the transition I'm just now settling into? I needed time to get my stuff together before I could approach Miss Tyson. Sis, Miss Cicely was well into her 90s. How much time were you banking on here? That was the voice of my inner critic. What made my reflections on the situation even harder to stomach was listening to the interview she did with Gayle King. When Miss Tyson mentioned that she felt like she still had work to do, and that's why she was still here, I placed my hands over my face. Regret. A formidable teacher. Please understand, I am not delusional in my thinking that this remarkable woman was tied to this plane because of my children's book. I am sure Tyler Perry had at least 5 more projects slated for her. However, what if I had stepped forward into the dream I allowed myself to speak to someone who just happened to have a key to unlock a door? Do you have any stories of regret versus risk? And what have you learned from them? For me, I can recount situations where I truly regretted the outcomes. Clearly, not reaching out to Miss Tyson is pretty high on my list. I also can relive those times I have taken a risk and was better for it. What I am going to encourage myself to do moving forward, and would love for you to try it out with me, is to use regret in a more concrete way in order to actualize my liberation and further embrace my purpose. Here are a few questions I would like for us to play with. You know you missed my 7 questions. Question 1. What are the stories I am telling myself about stepping into this opportunity? Are they my stories or stories passed on to me for safety's sake? Physical, psychological, or both? Number 2, who do I have in my circle of support that can talk me off the fear of failure, fear of success ledge in those moments where my inner critic seems to be most convincing? Number 3, what role, if any, does my spirituality play in me stepping into and preparing for opportunities outside of my comfort zone? Number 4, speaking of preparation, what role, if any, does perfectionism have in the emotional paralysis that occurs when I'm preparing for a large-scaled opportunity? Number 5, what have I learned, embodied, and enabled in myself and those around me about taking risks, and what needs to change / be dismantled, if anything, to accommodate opportunities that align with what I see as my purpose? Number 6, what are examples of living a life of regret that I can visualize in those moments of making the commitment to follow through on my goals that will shake me out of complacency? Number 7, how can I use my story of regret to inspire others to have the courage to step out of their comfort zones while relinquishing the shame associated with the experience? I would like to leave you with the words of Miss Cicely Tyson as she talks about the journey to writing her autobiography, Just As I Am.
I never intended to write an autobiography. Decades ago, after I presented an award to Barbara Jordan, the trailblazing civil rights activist and the first African American elected to the Texas Senate, I asked her, "When are you going to write your book?" A smile spread across Barbara's face. "When I have something to say," she told me. In that moment, I decided that if a woman as accomplished as Barbara could get away with such a reply, so could I. Years later, a gentleman from the Washington Post interviewed me. "When are you going to do your book?" he asked. And just as I had been doing for some time by then, I borrowed Barbara's response. "When I have something to say," I told him. "Well, I've been talking to you for 3 hours," he said, chuckling, "and it sounds to me like you've got plenty to say." I nodded and gave him the same grin Barbara had once given me, with no plan of ever committing my story to the page. Back then, to me, an autobiography was not personal. I thought of it as a written record of my public journey, an account of my stage and film roles, the parts of my experience in view of the world. It was my story through the lens of Miss Jane Pittman, through Rebecca in Sounda and Binta in Roots. To be sure, there are traces of who I am in every woman I have portrayed. In the tenacity of Harriet Tubman, and the quiet strength of Coretta Scott King, I can be glimpsed. In the trembling fingers of Constantine in The Help, and in the determination of Miss Carrie Watts in Bountiful, my thumbprint is recognizable. Every one of these characters has left me with an emotional, spiritual, and psychological inheritance I will forever carry with me. But while each in some way reflected me, none could reveal who I am in my entirety. A few years ago, my agent, Larry Thompson, started in on me again about writing a memoir. "You've got to do a book," he said one afternoon. "Yeah, you and the world think that," I told him, shaking my head. "No, I'm serious," he persisted. "It's time." I uttered the same refrain I'd been repeating to him for months. The lights and the trimmings of my career, the accolades, as far as I was concerned, none of it needed to be recounted. For me, the greatest gratification has come in refining my craft, not in gazing upon its merits. He stared at me for a long moment. "You're talking about a Christmas tree," he finally said. "What?" I asked. "Everybody thinks they know who Cicely Tyson is," he explained. "But what they see are the ornaments on the branches, the decorations. They know nothing about the roots." That conversation is what planted the seed for Just As I Am.
Thank you, Miss Tyson, for every lesson you taught us about love, justice, liberation, and thank you for teaching us that our words, the power of our words, are so much more than metaphors.